Are you a parent wondering if you're doing right by your kids?
A therapist seeking real-world applications for working with children and their families?
A teacher trying to navigate educating the whole child in today's world?
Then this is the podcast for you.
Hey guys, it's Brigid
And Jenna.
the teacher.
And the therapist.
We are back.
Woohoo! I can't believe this is episode 11.
11. I'm excited.
Yeah. Today, we're talking about getting a 504 plan.
Okay.
What that is, how you get one, why a kid might need one, how to advocate to make sure it's followed. Because there's just so many steps to it.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, Brigid, I think this is going to be kind of an episode where you shine and it's a little bit more in your wheelhouse. So to start off, what exactly is a 504? Why don't you tell us?
So 504 plan refers to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, passed in 1973.
Wow, okay.
It was designed to protect people with disabilities in many areas, but specifically the plan is for students in elementary school, middle school, high school.
Okay.
Basically, what it says, without sounding like too technical, it is designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities in programs that are financed by federal dollars.
Oh,
so like if the U.S. Department of Education is sending money to your institution, then you would be protected under this plan.
Section 504.
So it's like a legally binding thing.
So does that mean that then college students also qualify if it's like federally funded?
So yes, college students do apply. It's a little bit different for college students.
Okay.
But it does, you would qualify for that. You would go through your like Department of Disabilities at your school,
whatever it's
or
called there, at
Student
your
Affairs
university.
is a good place to start. But yes, especially if you know you've gotten accommodations like through high school and things like that, you can still get those same accommodations in college.
You should get
absolutely.
Those. You have the right to them.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what exactly does it mean to have a 504, or like what does it like provide the student, I guess?
So 504 regulations are basically to ensure that every child gets a free, appropriate public education.
Okay.
Everyone across the board gets that, disability or otherwise.
So
the purpose of it is to like make whatever unique things that they need to be successful in school, whatever accommodations that are going to put them on that even playing field with their non-disabled peers.
Okay.
So we're trying to eliminate any deficits that might be there because of their disability.
Sure. So it's not necessarily, even though it gives, Section 504 is meant to be like everybody gets free, appropriate public education, but that doesn't mean everybody gets the same thing. Right? Yeah, because this image, I don't know if you've seen it, of like these three people watching a baseball game kind of over a fence. There's a fence in the baseball game. Have you seen that?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like, if for any of our listeners who haven't, it looks to be like an adult, an older child, a younger child, maybe toddler or something, preschooler. And they're each standing on one box, the same height, and it's at like the adult's like waist, and then the older kid can like barely see over, and the younger child still can't see.
Correct.
They're not tall enough. And then I think they call that one like equality. Like everybody has
the
same
one box
thing.
to stand on. Yep.
Yeah. But then the next image is like equity, and it's the adult standing on the ground can still see, and the older child, taller child has one box and the younger one has two. So then they can all see over the fence and watch the game, which I don't know, that kind of, obviously it is not like comparable, but I think that's the idea I get, is that because I've heard that even when I was in school of like, well, why does he get that? Why does he get to do X, Y, and Z? Like, that's not fair. Yeah. But it's like meant to make it a level playing field, not like everybody gets this.
Right. So it's meant to be helping specifically the people who need it. Yeah. So one of the explanations that I've heard used in the classroom is like if you have a scrape on your elbow. Okay. And so the teacher will say, has anyone ever fallen and scraped their elbow? And of course, so many kids have.
Or like,
and
yes,
so,
yeah.
One child comes up and you say, okay, here's a Band-Aid. You can put that on your elbow. And then they sit down and the teacher says, well, has anyone ever scraped their knee? And of course, kids raise their hand. And so she calls on one to come up and she says, okay, here you go. Here's a Band-Aid for your elbow. And they're like, what? That's not where I need it. I don't need help on my elbow. I need help on my knee. And so then you go through, has anyone ever scraped their forehead? Oh, here's a Band-Aid for your elbow. And so then they start to realize that giving the same thing to everyone is not helpful because not everyone needs help in the same area.
Yeah. I've also heard it with like wearing glasses of like, yeah, we could just be like, everybody in the class gets a pair of eyeglasses, but not everybody needs them.
Right. Or everyone gets the same prescription.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think when you put it like that, it's very understandable, even to like parents or some educators, I could imagine, that don't understand because that's a very like, well, they can't see. Of course, my kid needs glasses.
Right.
Like, if somebody at school was not allowing your child to wear their glasses, that would be a huge problem.
Yeah.
And very similarly, and we'll get into that later, but if someone's not allowing your child to have the accommodations that they have the right to, that it's the same thing. So what are some of these maybe like accommodations or what would be included? How might it look in a classroom?
Accommodations can include so many things. I mean, it's very tailored to the individual student
Whatever
and what their needs are.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it might be you sit at the front of the classroom because then there's less distractions around you. Sometimes it might be sitting in alternative seating. Like you get a wiggle chair or you get like one of those bouncy things for your feet or like fidgets, having fidgets in your hands or being allowed to stand to do your work. Sensory breaks. There's like usually a lot of schools lately have sensory rooms. Yeah. So being able to kind of move around as you need to meet your needs.
Yeah.
Alternative assignments is a big one.
Okay.
Or like lessened homework is a big one. There's no limit.
What you need.
Yes,
yeah.
Literally anything that you need to be on a level playing field with your peers.
Okay. Yeah. And in addition to 504, like I said, I don't know a ton about it. And I just know like from when my clients will sometimes have them or I'll do some documentation and advocate for them. But I also hear a lot about IEPs. And I think a lot of times they're like, oh, I have a 504 IEP, or they kind of get conflated. And I know, IEPs can give you extra time or like, I know just from me, or at least from what I'm understanding of like when I was in high school, some kids would go take their test in a quiet place or have the test questions read out to them and things like that. So how does that differ? Or could those be the same accommodations under a 504?
Yeah. So basically everything that you're talking about is still a 504.
Okay.
So an IEP is different. An IEP is an individualized education program, which is basically what you're going to learn.
Okay.
And the 504 is more how you're going to learn.
How you're going to achieve those.
Exactly.
Got it.
So we talked about how the 504 comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. The IEP comes from the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That was passed in 1975. So they're slightly different.
Yeah.
They're both like legal documents, but they kind of do different things.
Okay.
An IEP is going to be for a child who needs to have different learning standards. Maybe it's going to be for a child with cerebral palsy who their goals need to be like learning how to walk if that's something they're able to do, or
like
learning self-help skills.
Yeah, I was going to say like individual skills.
I think a lot of the time they call them like life skills classes. So they have different goals that they're working on.
That they're meeting.
Meanwhile, the 504, you're working on the same standards that everyone else is working on.
Okay, you're trying to learn the same thing.
Right. So like if our standards, like every state has their standards that they've listed. This grade, you must teach these topics. This is what they need to know by the end of the year. And it's the same. So if we're learning all 50 state capitals, even if you have a 504, you're still learning all 50 state capitals.
Okay.
Whereas if you have an IEP, maybe you're just learning the state that you live in. It's tailored more to you. What you're learning
your
changes.
level. Yeah. Okay. I got it.
Yeah. So, but if you're able to operate on that same level of standards,
learning
you don't need an IEP. You don't need your education to be specialized to you. You just need those accommodations.
The accommodations in order to learn all 50 state
and so
capitals.
You would get a 504.
Got it. Okay.
So a lot of the times
you could have both.
You could have both.
Okay.
But it would be redundant.
Okay.
Because anything you can put in a 504, you can put in the IEP.
Got it. Okay.
So like you would put those accommodations right into the IEP.
You're learning this and this is how you're going to do it.
You could do both, but
sure, it wouldn't really
typically
make
you
sense.
don't. Yeah. But if you qualify for an IEP, you would qualify for a 504.
Okay.
But it's not the other way around.
Yeah. Got it. So you gave the example of like the cerebral palsy for someone maybe that could benefit from or would need an IEP. What about like who, I know this is probably a broad question, but like who or why would you get a 504?
Well, it's because it goes with the Disabilities Act, right? It's any disability.
Anything that
typically we see 504 specifically with like ADHD, autism, deaf or blindness.
Oh, okay. Sense.
Things like that just
you need an interpreter.
They can learn the same things, but they need those accommodations to be at the same level as their friends.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I said friends because that's what we say in school. Teacher mode as their friends.
Their peers, yes. Same age peers.
Yeah.
Or same developmental peers, yeah. Yeah, so as I said, I really don't have like a ton of experience or knowledge about 504s. From my point of view and like my professional experience, students can apply for one like through the school district usually, and then they have like supporting documents. So I might say like, yeah, I could see potentially like autism as a diagnosis, ADHD as a diagnosis. So I might refer them for like neuropsych testing with one of our testing psychologists. I actually have a couple of school psychologists that work with me. And so sometimes they, can do those and say, yeah, you have a learning disability or it's in reading or math or it's ADHD. And then there might also be like letters from their medical doctors, from a psychiatrist. Sometimes the letter for me is pretty like factual. It's not like, yes, I think that they could have a 504, but it might be more like speaking to those accommodations of, hey, I've been treating this person since this date. I have the diagnosis of, anxiety disorder, and I believe that they could benefit from use of fidgets or sensory breaks or whatever it might be. But then ultimately, like from how I understand it is like all of that just kind of goes to the school district. They maybe sometimes have their own assessments and they kind of get to decide, right? So what does obtaining a 504 look like from the like education lens?
So a lot of parents think I need to get my child this diagnosis from their medical doctor because then they'll qualify for
they'll get it.
And that's not how it works. You can get a diagnosis, autism, ADHD, whatever, from whomever in the medical world. But at the end of the day, that's not going to get you a 504. You're not guaranteed a 504 because you have that. Especially because they'll say, like, the way they phrase it is like educational autism is different from medical autism.
It's stupid.
Agreed, but that's how they kind of like skirt around it. They might say, well, you don't need accommodations in the classroom. So they can try to get around those things.
Yeah, that makes no sense given the diagnostic criteria, but okay.
Yes. So I know from working at a mental health facility, people call in all the time.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I want to get testing done because my child needs help.
For a 504.
All the time people say this to me. They'll call in and they'll say, how do I get testing done? My kid needs help. I need to get testing done as fast as I can. And every time I say, you're calling the wrong place. You got to start at the school.
Okay.
So the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to send a written request asking for a 504 plan at eligibility meeting.
Like meeting.
Yes. Every school district is a little different on where you would send that.
Okay.
Some schools are going to have like a department of disabilities or whatever. Some schools are going to have a special education department. Some schools are going to have a school psychologist. It sort of depends.
That goes to them, yeah.
So you're going to have to kind of do your own digging around to see where it would go. But a good place to start is always going to be their teacher.
They should know
whoever their
where
homeroom.
To go.
Yeah, they should be able to direct you, or even you could give it to them,
and they could give it to the person.
Should be getting it to where it needs to go.
Okay.
And so many times I hear parents say to me, "Well, the teacher never said they could help," and that gets on my nerves. Teachers, please. If there's a child struggling in your class and they could benefit from this, why would you not tell the parents?
You would think that like teachers would want, and I hope, and I would assume a lot of teachers do want like everybody to succeed. So if you're noticing, hey, the student could use help learning these things, that you would want that.
I think some of it comes down to teachers are overwhelmed.
Sure.
Teachers are burnt out. Teachers have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And having more students with 504s and IEPs makes more work for the teacher.
It's harder, yeah.
So this is not the case for all teachers. Obviously, there are teachers out there who are going to be doing the best for their kids. But just the amount of times that I tell a parent, oh, yeah, you want to start with your teacher at the school. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, the teacher told me there's a problem. They didn't tell me they could help. Okay. Even if your teacher has not said anything to you, that is where you start. You tell them, I want a 504 eligibility meeting and I want to know what's going on. The biggest recommendation I can give when you do that is do it in writing, date it.
Okay.
Because they have a certain amount of time. I think it might be different from IEPs. It's either 30 or 60 days.
From like the date of the request.
From the date that you're requesting it, that they must respond to you.
Okay.
So definitely.
That's good advice.
Put it in writing, date it, give it to them. And then we'll go from there. So then from there, once they get this, they're going to, I had another piece of advice. Wait, back up. So write it down, date it, and then specifically request to be included in that meeting.
Oh, as the parent.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
When you are...
They're not automatically...
You're not.
Okay.
For an IEP, parents are automatically required to be a part of that process.
Come to the meeting or whatever. Okay.
For a 504, it's not...
required.
It's not required.
Okay. So they could not be there.
Exactly. They could just have this meeting about your child and you could not be involved. So specifically saying to them, I want to be part of this meeting.
Sure.
Kind of lets them know that you're aware because you are allowed to be. You're just not required to be.
Right.
So they don't have to. Like if you're doing an IEP meeting, they're going to come out after you and say, hey, when can we do this? You can be there. You have to attend. It's not the same for a 504. So make sure you know you have a right to be there. So then you can give them all these things. If you have those support things, like you've been diagnosed elsewhere, you have a letter from your counselor, you have whatever it is, you have documentation that shows where your child needs help. They'll review that.
Okay.
Typically, they might do their own evaluation. Like they might see if you have an IEP, or I'm sorry, if you have they might do a ADHD assessment in their thing.
See it. Okay.
To see if you qualify for what they say. Or they might see, they might do a reading screening to see, you do have a reading deficiency.
Yeah.
So that maybe you would need some of these accommodations. So at that meeting, it would be typically a special education teacher, a typical classroom teacher, like a psychologist or someone who specializes in these things, generally some head person, like a principal, whoever they've designated as their responsible person. There. Yes. And they'll kind of go through everything that you've presented to them. And then this is where things get a little tricky because they can go through all of these things that you've presented to them and say, we don't think you're impacted enough by this disability. So
to need accommodation.
Exactly. So I think the threshold is moderately to severely impacted.
Which is so subjective too. I mean, what does that mean? What's moderately affected?
It's very subjective. And you can see this. I see it all the time in children who are going to get assessed by their different school districts. Because basically you go through the school district that you live in.
Sure.
I work in a private school, and so they don't go through my school. They have to go back to their home school
wherever they work or live.
And so you'll see children who live in District A who I could swear up and down this child needs this accommodation. They need an IEP. They need whatever it is. And they're like, they're probably fine. Meanwhile, I have a child in a different district who I'm like, you can go for it if you want. I don't know if they'll approve it, whatever, but feel free. And they go through and they're like, oh yeah, we're getting free school and speech therapy and occupational therapy and all these things that it's great. But I'm like, how did child A not qualify?
Yeah.
But it's because child B, their school district just has more resources.
I was just going to say that, or does it, I could imagine if it's inner city, you're kind of, not that they norm it, but then they're like, well, I see all these kids that need it, quote unquote, more.
Yeah.
So you don't, even though it's individual.
And that is
not
so
it
dangerous.
Doesn't affect it.
Such a dangerous way of thinking because they're saying you don't need it as much as these other kids.
And so therefore you don't get it.
Exactly. And when you're in those, the district that I live in is a city, it's underfunded, it's plenty of kids who need help. And so then the children who need less help, they're just like, nah, we don't have anything left over for you. We have to give it all to these more severe, quote unquote, needs. Whereas these other districts where kids get approved more easily, it's because they have more resources.
Yeah.
They might have
potentially more
less kids that
affluent.
they're servicing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tricky. Something to know is that if you go through this process and you're getting your evaluation done and they deny you,
Mm-hmm.
you are allowed to appeal that.
Oh, okay.
And you can appeal
That's
that.
good information to
Yes.
know for
You
parents.
can appeal that with and request a mediator to be there.
Okay.
So a mediator is someone who do not work for the school district.
Okay.
But they also don't work for you. It's supposed to just be a neutral party.
Right. Unbiased.
Exactly. And so then they would review the whatever evidence, so to speak. Yeah, documentation. And kind of determine if they think that the needs are enough.
What type of people would that be? Someone from a different district or something or a different school? Like, who would that be? What kind of qualifications?
Okay, I have no idea.
Is a mediator? I'm just curious.
I don't know.
Do we want someone in the education realm? Do we want?
I assume it would be someone like a psychologist, a neuropsychologist, something like that. Someone who has that knowledge and skill set.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But I don't think we would want to use like a school district employee, even if it's a different one.
Right.
Because then they are going to be kind of biased towards a school district.
What the school's going to say, or what they already say. Obviously, if there's an appeal, it was that they didn't get
they said no.
504.
And there's also almost every district has like a team of parent partners for families going through this.
Okay, like who already have a 504
who have been through it, who are kind of like experts on the process and basically can kind of help you make sure that you know your rights and that you are getting what you need for your child.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately it happens more often than you'd think that kids are kind of getting swept to the side.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've been a part of 504 meetings and it's very interesting. To say the least.
What have you seen in your 504 meeting been a part of?
I've only been a part of it for one client. Which a lot of my clients have 504s, but it was or have applied for them. But I've only been, obviously I don't need to be there. It was at the request of the parent that I be there. I think just as more like support, you know?
Like a professional that's on their side.
Basically,
honestly,
basically that's, yes. But it was just very interesting. It was like partially in person and partially video. So I think it was just very chaotic because of that. People would be like talking over people and because it was like this person's online, or I would be talking and then the other person that was videoing in couldn't hear me because I was talking through a computer. So it was just kind of like messy. But it was very much like, don't label the child like that and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, I'm telling you the diagnosis I've given them. That's up to you. But which was interesting because it's not, I will hear that from parents. I don't want them to be labeled autistic. I don't want them to have that label. So it was interesting coming from, and it was more behavior. I wasn't saying like autism or ADHD. I was referencing a behavior and they were like very, very like, I don't know, upset about that, I guess.
Because if you say that child is that, then they have to accommodate that. And this is like a soapbox topic for me personally because it's frankly disgusting the way it plays out sometimes.
You see it play out. So.
Obviously, it's not the case all the time. Obviously, there are good districts where they're doing the best they can.
The accommodation.
Or there's districts where they're doing the best they can, but they don't have a lot to give.
Yeah. Well, sure. Because I know, like I was saying, like I would know of kids that would like leave the classroom for a test when I was in high school. Or if you went to, I would like go to the guidance hall to get to like change my class schedule or something. And sometimes they would be like, I could hear a test being read out loud.
Right.
And so
that's a very common accommodation.
If you don't like have the personnel to be able to do that, right? Like students, especially depending on age, if they're very young kids, like you need to at least have somebody like an adult nearby.
Yes.
So if it's like, well, we literally have one teacher per classroom and not a whole lot of extra, I know just from working in schools, and we'll probably get into this in another episode, as a counselor, that it is very common that you are the counselor for the district. And not me as an outside person, but like the school counselor has, 3 primary schools or whatever. So they're only there once or twice a week. And so it's like, do you even have that personnel for somebody to read the test, for them to sit in a quieter place or whatever it looks like? Like, it might just be a resource thing.
Yeah, it might be. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because that child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education.
Right.
Appropriate being the key word.
Appropriate to them.
Appropriate
their
for
needs.
them. Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
It also can get tricky when you start looking at public or private schools.
Sure.
Because they do not fall under the same realm. They
they're not federally funded.
Right. They do not have to offer any services, basically. And they even get to be even more selective about when they do choose to offer a service.
I'm curious, and I don't know if you would know this, the high school that we attended, the, support staff, like the guidance counselors were employed by the public school district in the private school. So I don't know, does that make a difference at all?
That does happen. A lot of times it happens specifically for like psychologists or counselors, or for the one I see a lot is like reading speech language pathologists or reading professionals would be employed by the local school district. But not always.
Right. I didn't know if that would change it at all about like the, there's still, the school's not federally funded. So I guess it doesn't fall under this exact thing.
The school basically at the end of the day, when it's a private school, gets to say, I don't even want your child here. They can just deny
It's not a public. Obviously, if you live in the district, you have to go. Or they have to take you.
So it can get really dicey if it's a private school. Luckily, if you have a good school that's willing to work with you, you can still get those accommodations, like tests being read or homework being halved or whatever.
Yeah, different.
Which that one is mind-boggling to me because I've had so many parents be like, wait, they don't have to do homework? I'm like, no. Like, you can get that in their IEP, in their 504, that they either get like half of what the other students do or even as much as none.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've referenced this, I don't even know what episode, of studies show you don't learn from homework.
Is stupid.
Like, you don't learn from it. You're not like, I don't know, more advanced because you did 100 math facts every night or timetables.
Okay. You probably should do your times tables, though, everyone, because I didn't and I still don't know them.
You can't multiply?
Because ADHD brain.
Do you use your fingers to do multiplication by nines? Because
absolutely I do.
Definitely still do that.
If you don't know that trick, it's like you put down whatever finger.
So like 9 times 2, you put down your second finger, and then you have the pinky, so that's 1, and then
that's
8.
the tens,
so
and then 8
Or
ones.
if you put down 4, it's 3 and then 6, so it's 36.
Yes, I absolutely do that. My dad taught that to me. Shout out, Dad.
I think the teacher taught me. I think the teacher was like, we're going to cut the BS. Use your fingers.
I still remember to this day, I believe the day that I started hating multiplication. Because you know those...
I can bring it down to a day.
I am not even...
Instant.
I remember this because you did the time tests. Did you do that?
Yeah,
right?
And you had to like do as many as you could.
And so I had just recently learned how to make a 4 with like the triangle and the line down.
Yeah.
Instead of a typical down and over and down some more. That is how you make a 4, right? Okay.
She's such a teacher.
So I had just learned the fancy triangle way. And so I was doing that. And it was literally 2 times 2. I specifically remember it was 2 times 2. And I put 4 in the fancy way.
9.
And they marked it wrong because it was a 9. And I told the teacher, I was like, it's a 4. I wrote a 4. Like, I don't think 2 times 2 is 9.
I'm not dumb.
Right. I was like, are you kidding me? No, I don't. That's like the easiest math fact. And she marked it wrong. And she would not listen to me that it was a 4. And now I hate math to this day.
That's because of that teacher.
I know.
Would you like to at her?
No. No, I have worst. Actually, to be honest, I don't remember what teacher it was. I just remember it happening.
It's 2 by 2. Yeah,
I think
2 times 2.
Probably 3rd grade. That's when math facts
I'm
going
to go back and find out.
But I liked my 3rd grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Massa.
Okay, so if you're out there, Mrs. Massa.
So maybe it wasn't her.
Who knows?
But I liked no, I think it was 3rd grade because I can remember the part of the school building
that you were in. Oh my gosh.
I was not in upper hall yet. That's when you're 4th grade, you're in the upper hall.
Upper hall. So I didn't have that.
It had to have been 3rd grade.
We had 4th grade right next to kindergarten. My school, there was no rhyme or reason.
See, my school
kindergarten was next to 5th grade.
One long hallway. Like just one straight hallway, and it starts kindergarten 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then 8th is out in the trailer.
we had 2 floors, but so like on the bottom floor, it was like 4th grade and then kindergarten and then the library and then 1st grade was inside the cafeteria.
What?
And then upstairs, it was the office and then 8th grade, 7th grade, 2nd grade.
What on earth were they doing?
5th grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten.
That's so weird.
It was wild. It was a wild time. Talk about private schools doing whatever they want. Anyway, well, I think this is really informative. I think you provide a lot of information that it's good for parents to know. They have the right to be there. Your child has the right to have this eligibility meeting, to get these accommodations. You can appeal it. Like, those are things that I didn't realize. So it's helpful even for me because I'm on the receiving end of that a lot of like, well, yeah, we tried and he didn't qualify for a 504. Mm-hmm. So I think it's helpful for me to even be able to be another advocate of like, okay, like, did you know that you have the option to appeal it? Obviously, you're the one going through the grunt work and like that can be frustrating. But just for like public knowledge that those are options and rights.
And the IEP is very similar too. Like if you feel that your child should be getting an IEP, it's the same process.
You can appeal it if they didn't get one.
Yeah, you would send a written request and then they have the 30 days to respond to you and do the evaluation. And if they deny you, you actually can request if you're doing an IEP, you can request an outside evaluation.
Okay.
So you can like specifically say, I want someone else, and the school is required to pay for it for someone to get that done. Mm-hmm. That can be, a step as your appeal. Again, the mediators are in place.
Sure.
And those parent partners are always going to be there.
As like an advocate. That's great.
Reach out. Like, honestly, just if you want to email us, your school district, I will help you find who you need to talk to.
I'll be Brigid. If I open the email, I will make sure I will say, hey, flagged for you. I don't know.
Yes. I can help. I just can't say because who knows where you are.
It depends. Yeah.
But this is also, obviously, we're recording in Ohio, but this is federal. Mm-hmm. Like 504s are federal plans.
Sure. And IEPs for that matter.
Yes. Yeah. So across the board, no matter what state you live in, no matter where you live, if you're in a different country.
Morocco.
Sorry.
Shout out.
Shout out to Sarah who listens in England.
Sarah, thank you. What a chat.
She's my bestie. Love Sarah. But you can really get these anywhere in the country. And it's the same laws that apply.
Yeah.
You are still entitled to that free appropriate public education. And not only that, but in the least restrictive environment.
Mm-hmm.
So
if they could be in like the typical
they cannot just take a child and put them in a special education classroom
or
they have to at least try
to accommodate.
Try it first in the mainstream classroom. I know we have a family friend who teaches 3rd grade at a local public school, and I believe her classroom is like 50-50.
Oh, okay.
So 50% of her kids are on IEPs, 504, something like that. 50% would be typical peers.
Got it.
So we'll have to have her come back as a guest and kind of talk about that.
For sure.
But she's off having a baby right now, got other stuff going on.
Whatever, that whole parenting thing.
I know. But yeah, so if you have any questions, Google is a good place to start. Start with your school district's website.
Sure.
And just know that you have rights and your child has rights, and we'll get them what they need. Yeah. We'll fight for your kiddos.
Miss Brigid, thank you so much for being such a good advocate. I appreciate that. And we will talk to you all next week.
All right. Bye. Guys.